Hey, Jason, just out of curiosity, what's the speaking order for today?
It will be Dean, then Cameron, Nick, Kailyn, you, and then Henry.
Is that for the opening question,
Awesome.
Jason?
Yes.
Okay.
Jason, do we know if Dean has joined us yet?
I don't see him yet. I was just about to send him the invitation
Okay.
once more.
I know at one point he actually had a radio show, I think, that ended at about this time.
Okay, understandable.
Yeah.
I'll send it again just to make sure he has it.
Yep.
Just give it one more minute here as people join.
Mhm. Hey, Dean.
Hey man, what's going on? Can you see me? Or am I on? Or am I not
I can
on?
see you.
All
Did
right.
you- Yeah. Nice to see you again.
Always a pleasure, my friend.
Yeah,
Always a
thanks for
pleasure.
joining us.
Not a problem.
Okay, great. Well, I think we can get started now. So welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar, Finding Light. My name is Jason Suyama, and I am the philanthropy team lead for Sigma Chi this year, and I'll be serving as your moderator. We as Sigma Chi are honored to be partnering with UBC's Heads Up Guys to launch this amazing fundraising initiative in support of its life-saving online resources. We believe this fundraising campaign and webinar is an excellent opportunity to encourage help-seeking behavior for young men by breaking the stigma around men's mental health. We are also excited to announce that we are only $2,000 off our goal of $25,000. And we are incredibly grateful for everyone's support so far, especially Mr. Cameron Keller, who has made a very generous contribution and will be joining us on the panel today. If you're interested in donating to our costs, please visit our UBC crowdfunding website. And today we are also giving away prizes to 2 lucky attendees of our webinar today. We have a $250 in premium coffee beans graciously donated by Blends Coffee and 24 fresh buns donated by Grounds for Coffee. To protect your privacy, we have decided to give these away anonymously. So if you're interested in being entered to join the draw for these prizes, please contact Sigma Chi Breaking the Silence at gmail.com with your name and contact information. So we'd like to start things off today with a few words from UBC President, Dr. Santa Ono.
Hi, I'm Santa Ono, President and Vice Chancellor of the University of British Columbia. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you to the 2022 Sigma Chi Men's Mental Health Fundraiser for Heads Up Guys. Sigma Chi fraternity is among the largest social fraternities in North America, with more than 244 active chapters across the continent and 350,000 members. And I congratulate them for organizing this fundraiser. According to Statistics Canada, suicide is one of the leading causes of death among men, and the second leading cause of death for men under the age of 45. Unfortunately, young people are reluctant to seek help when they have mental health issues. They're ashamed or they feel that others will judge them. That's why it's so important to have resources such as Heads Up Guys. On their website, you'll find tips, tools, success stories, and general information on dealing with depression and suicide. Heads Up Guys is a world leader in aiding men in the fight against depression. But it needs our help to do its job, which is why Sigma Chi is raising funds to help Heads Up Guys and to raise awareness on men's mental health on our campus and beyond. Thank you, Sigma Chi.
Great. So we will now move on to Dr. John Agronicsock, who is a professor and director of the psychotherapy program in the Department of Psychiatry here at UBC. As a director, he is overseeing the operations of North America's second largest medically based psychotherapy training program. John, thank you so much for all your help putting this event and fundraiser together. I'd like to begin the conversation today by asking, what does men's mental health mean to you, and how has that led you to create Heads Up Guys?
Well, men's mental health is about living becoming our best version of ourselves and living our best lives. That's really what this is about. And Professor Ono actually did a great introduction to Heads Up Guys and what we're about and why we need to have conversations like this. So, first and foremost, I'm really grateful for the initiative of Sigma Chi to help us raise the funds that we need to operate and grow and make ourselves available to men across the world. But more importantly, actually, is creating the space that you've done tonight and before and in the future as well, to have these kinds of conversations that are so important. When people are struggling with mental health challenges, they often feel very isolated in that experience, like no one else will understand, no one else feels like they do. But by having these conversations, we realize that we're truly not alone. There's a lot of empathy and compassion and support out in the world. The people who are close to us are there and ready and willing to give that, as long as we make it known that we need it. And guys in particular often are extremely reluctant to say, you know what, I'm struggling a bit, can I get a hand? But those words are so critical to making sure that we don't suffer in silence and that we get the supports and resources and tools to help ourselves toward becoming, like I said, that best version of ourselves. So again, thanks, Jason, and the rest of the crew at Sigma Chi. These conversations are critically important.
Oh, thank you very much. Couldn't have been possible without you.
Oh,
So now I'm excited to open up the panel today to dive a bit more into the topic of men's mental health and to bring awareness to the issues affecting not only the members of our community, but men and women across the globe. Joining us today are Dean Thomas, Cameron Keller, Nick Smit, Kailyn Leblanc, Matthew Herbert, and Henry Van Dyke. welcome to you all. So I'd love to start with Dean Thomas. Dean is a retired UFC professional MMA fighter and is now a coach, mentor, and trainer for other MMA fighters. He's also a star in the hit TV show Dana White, Looking for a Fight, and a co-host of The Home Team on ESPN West Palm. Dean, we'd love to hear from you today about your life and career and what led you to join the discussion on men's mental health.
I mean, it's tough. I mean, I'm in an industry where I feel like many of the people in my industry suffer from mental health issues, which is why we get into the industry of combat and, beating people up. And we oftentimes use it as an excuse or sort of a Band-Aid to put over mental health and say, okay, I'm getting into martial arts because I need a solution for my mental health, but I don't necessarily think that that's the solution. I think it's kind of a Band-Aid and a way to kind of cover it up and hide it a little bit. So I kind of got involved with my mental health in terms of like paying attention to it a few years ago when I was going through some terrible things, and I realized it was deeper than just the terrible things that I was going through, that it was like a lifelong, accumulation of holding on to these mental problems and not being able to talk about them because I am a professional fighter or a tough guy or an alpha male, but not being able to talk about this stuff. So I feel like now that I am able to talk about it, I have a responsibility to allow others to talk about it and give other people permission to talk about it and open up and be honest, so that they can find help and seek help to get what they need, as opposed to putting a Band-Aid over it, but to go deeper and find serious help in which everyone, I think, needs.
Yeah, completely. And that's a big goal of the webinar today. We're really trying to open the doors and kind of create the safe space for people to start talking about it. But like you said, everyone kind of has their own outlets to deal with it.
Yeah. I mean, it's a real serious thing, and especially in the industry that I'm in, because we're given a platform. As a professional fighter, we're given a platform, and you can go one of two ways about using your platform. You can use it in a good way, or you can use it in a negative way. And if you don't first recognize and accept that you may have mental issues, chances are it's going to be utilized in a negative way. And this is where we see, guys do stupid things and crazy things and end up hurting themselves or somebody else. And I was in a situation where there were times where I wanted to hurt myself. But it wasn't until, I found help, I was able to talk about it through therapy, and then just really starting to pay attention to my self-care, that I was able to actually now address it and then deal with it. So that now that, there's no, now that I don't have to hide it and go, all right, you know what, I'm a tough guy, just man up and be strong about it. What do you, don't be soft, don't be I ain't gonna say it, but you guys know what I'm talking about. But, the reality is that, there's nothing wrong with being vulnerable and having emotions and being able to express yourself and talk to other people about it, because it may save your life or somebody else's life.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for sharing. Next on the panel, I'd like to introduce Mr. Cameron Keller. Cameron is currently the president of Kaleidoscope Training and Consulting and is former vice president of the Mental Health Commission of Canada. Cameron, as a successful businessman, what was your biggest mental obstacle working in the professional world? And what kind of advice would you give to young and older men struggling with their mental health?
Well, thank you, Jason. And I just want to begin by acknowledging yourself and the great effort and the leadership that you and your brothers at Sigma Chi have put into this. Also, just want to take a moment to appreciate my fellow panelists and the expertise that is going to be shared here over the next 75 to 90 minutes. So Jason, in response to the question with respect to business, I would say there's a handful of things, but before I get to that, I just want to say that what's happening here, just even right now, this is what it's all about. It's about the conversation. And it's about just speaking up. And particularly as men, oftentimes we have these sort of cultural norms around masculinity that sort of keep us, hey, from talking, as Dean said there, in open and vulnerable ways. And I think just creating the platform, creating the space to just come together and just have the chat. This is critical. And so when I relate that to business, in the business world, or when you think about being an executive or a leader, there is an element of sort of isolation that comes with that, whether it be associated with extensive travel, whether it be associated with having to make really difficult strategic decisions and not let everybody in on those, whether they have to do with budgets or staffing changes or new programs, or maybe even discontinuing things that once were available. Those can be hard decisions. And it's really critical to surround yourself with good people in business. And so that includes not only having good staff and a good team to rely on to execute on whatever strategic initiative you're undertaking, but also your own support network. It's critical to have, even if it's just 2 or 3 people that can check in with you, that can kind of know when you're not okay. Because remember this, it's okay not to be okay. What's not okay is to not do anything about it. And what's not okay is to not say something about it. So I think the support network is really critical. I think without that, loneliness can creep in when you're at the top of an organization, when you're leading a large initiative, you can kind of feel very isolated. I think one of the other things that's important is really focusing on goal setting and understanding. And when you're looking strategically at a big picture, everything can seem so big and unattainable. And it's critical to always have a plan, to have a strategy, to break things down into bite-sized pieces, take it a day, a week at a time, even half a day at a time. And so just really having that sense as to where am I at today? Where am I going to get to? And what's the roadmap to getting there? And that just helps break things down. And what we actually know from brain science research is when we set goals, we actually help organize the prefrontal cortex. And this would apply for young men starting businesses, to get to that part of your question, Jason, or young men in university, when you're feeling overwhelmed, when there's a lot on your plate, to just know that when you break it down, you really do organize the brain, and it helps relieve, what that amygdala is doing when the amygdala is firing fight, flight, freeze. So my best advice, set goals, be clear, have a support network around you, have the conversation. It's okay not to be okay. It's not okay to not talk about it when you're not okay.
I love that. Thank you very much. So now moving on to our next panelist, Mr. Nick Smit. Nick is the head of financial institutions at ING Bank in New York City and a member of the LGBTQ+ community. We're very grateful to have you here to share your thoughts and perspectives on men's mental health. So Nick, can you talk about any experiences in your life in which you or a family member ever felt pressure to conform to a particular stereotype? And how does that tie into what you believe is the meaning of masculinity?
Hi, Jason. Great to be here tonight, and Sigma Chi. Congratulations on having these discussions right at this very young age that you guys are in, when you're forming your life. I mean, that's such a critical moment in your life. And so I'm going to actually talk really much about that moment in my life when I was at university and coming out, and how I was not healthy around that subject and unable to talk about it. And then I think the second part that's good to discuss is what did you learn from it, right? What do you take away from that moment, that critical moment in your life, as Dean says, right? That you have suicidal thoughts or that you have terrible anxiety, and what do you do with it? Well, to start off with, my own experience was when I was at university, obviously on the student representative council. It was in South Africa. It was that whole anti-apartheid movement. I was very much involved in that. Religion was a very important part of that society. I think a lot of people come from that environment still, right? Of your university, you grow up in a very religious, very strict environment. You don't trust your parents will understand you. That's often you think that they will reject you, and maybe they will. In certain societies, you never should assume that they're not going to, but they might. But what I think is that often, and we're our own biggest enemy. It's more you're scared that you're going to be rejected. You're scared you're not going to be successful politically. You're scared you're not going to be, and then you give up. You don't reach out to your friends. You don't talk to people around you. You actually don't trust your parents sometimes, you know. It was a non-event actually to my mom, at least, right, when I came out. So that part is very interesting to me. And the part that helped me was to take a step away from that conservative, restrictive environment that I was living in. And I got the chance to work in Amsterdam, in Brussels, in Geneva, and in New York. But specifically Amsterdam was important because there was this freedom around it. And what happened once was we had like a social event, and it was more like a don't ask, don't tell was the kind of environment we lived in South Africa. And I think there's a lot of societies that are still like that. And my boss came to us after we had a social event at my house and said, where was your husband? Or we saw there was another man on the door, and why did you? And it's true, I hid him. I said, like, you got to go to the movies and then you come back later, and then I'm going to have my colleagues over here. And after my boss said that to me, I was like, you're stupid. You have to be open about these things and just live your life. And so if I turn that around to like what helped me to come to peace with it, I think, first of all, I think that idea of having really important people around you that care for you, that mean something to you, reach out to them. Take that first step and talk to whatever it is, you know, whether it's LGBT plus or it's discrimination or it's marginalization because of whatever factor. Turn to that person or those persons very close to you, share your feeling with them, and then build it out. Go to more people and build it out. So make sure you have some significant others around you. These days we're so on social media and everybody is so famous and they have so many likes, but those likes often don't mean a lot. It's more your parents, your closest buddies, your Sigma Chi buddies, those are the people that you should be turning to and taking. And then I think that the other part is look at role models, look for role models in your society. You know, I mean, I'm so proud you can say that Tim Cook is CEO of Apple, the biggest company in the world, or that Pete Buttigieg is the Commerce Secretary that stood to be the President of the United States, right? These people didn't believe that there were barriers to their achievements. So yes, I think those things are very important. Build up a close group of friends. And I think Dean is probably going to talk more about this, but I believe in sport. Belong to a sports group and do cardio regularly and break the stress. And that's the way I handle it. And take your whole self to the work. Because if there's something you're hiding, your colleagues love that. Because that's what they feast on. Is that part that you hide. If it's all open, it's a non-event, guess what? And then you can be yourself and you can go to work and you can talk about your weekends, you can talk about your holidays, and you can talk who went with you on a holiday, and you don't have to hide stuff. I'm going to stop there, Jason, and I'd rather have questions come around my experience, and thanks for asking me on the panel.
No, thank you very much. I really appreciate your advice. So next I'll introduce Mr. Kailyn Leblanc, an alumnus of the Sigma Chi Delta Omicron chapter here at UBC, and he's dedicated a lot of time into a venture that helps to help athletes who are struggling with their mental health. And so Kailyn, I'm wondering, what do you think is the biggest challenge young men face when reaching out for help? And What do you think is the biggest issue that must be overcome to break the stigma?
Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm happy to be back. I think actually our venture Uplift at the time, one of our advisors actually were the ones who won the first workshop at UBC like 3 years ago. So it's just scaled so much higher than it ever was back then. So I'm really happy to see that. So I think like probably the best way to answer that was I can kind of give a bit of a history as to kind of how we started. I should kind of add the caveat that we're not running the venture anymore right now. We kind of got to a point where, you know, just due to the stages of where we were at, recent graduates and stuff, we weren't able to do it, but the idea is still there and there's a lot of good work done with it. So a lot of it kind of came from the fact of growing up when I was a kid playing hockey, especially getting to that point of junior hockey. That was kind of the first stage and where you know, the idea of business and sport kind of involved with each other, right? That was the point where I had a dollar sign attached to my head and there's a trade value attached to me, right? And whether that was some form of, you know, internal expectations or pseudo external pressure I'd put on myself, there's a lot of times I could kind of see these things dwelling up or building up in myself. And I had just a fear to talk to anyone about it, right? I had a fear that I would create some form of weakness, or, you know, if I told my coach about it, that he would just trade me the next day, right? And it was a similar sentiment kind of shared across a lot of my teammates as well, right? To a certain point of, you know, I unfortunately had to say that there was a couple of my teammates that did commit suicide because of that, right? It's a heavy thing to say, but, you know, people just don't really know how to talk about it and they have that fear of weakness with it, right? So I would say like the biggest things is like understanding that, you know, it's never a form of weakness, right? Even now, like that was something I had learned in my athletic days that coming into the business world now, I still had a similar sentiment for the first couple of years. I was like, you know, I'm scared to tell my manager about something I'm struggling with. There's some mental health kind of burden I'm feeling right now and fear of what if I can't get promoted? You know what I mean? Things like that. But when you kind of like can talk out loud or talk to a kind of support network surrounding that and really get those out there, you kind of realize that, hey, that's not really the case. And a lot of people actually want to help you and they want to support you all around the place, right? It's really just taking that step and changing your mindset around that to say, hey, you know, this isn't a weakness of mine. Everyone really goes through it at some point. If anything, it's kind of strong, the fact that I'm able to recognize what I'm feeling right now, understand it's okay, it's completely normal, and have the courage to really talk about it and kind of bring that dialogue to the table, right? I think that would be the biggest things I would say surrounding it is really changing the mindset around it. You know what I mean? It's normal to feel what you feel, you know, especially at the stage like a lot of you are in right now, right? In university, there's so many things that are going around, right? You have exams, relationships, internal pressures you're putting on yourself, and just balancing the rest of your life. You know what I mean? So to feel overwhelmed at times, yeah, that's completely normal, right? Just feel comfortable and confident knowing that you can talk to people and people want to help you at the end of the day, right? I think that's what I'll say. I'm kind of in the same boat as Nick. I'm kind of excited for the questions right now, to be honest with you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. And finally, we have two members from Sigma Chi's active chapter at UBC. Matthew Herbert is a fourth-year student studying kinesiology, and Henry Van Dyke is a third-year student in mechatronics engineering, who's also currently working on a mental health art therapy startup. Well, starting with Matt, as students here at UBC, many of us struggle to balance our school and our mental health. What are some things that you think university students can do to overcome these school-related anxiety and depression challenges? And what are some things that have worked for you?
For sure. Just to check, can you hear me, Jason? Totally fine?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Awesome. So I personally haven't really had any mental health issues in my life kind of arising from school, but I have had my fair share of experience in balancing obviously a heavy workload being a fourth year university student, as well as kind of extraneous mental health troubles that I'm going through. So what I kind of did in preparation for today is I just kind of put down a list, a bit of a tip format of what things that I've done in order to just kind of balance again those two things and how to get my work done and succeed in school, especially since I've personally found for myself and for a lot of people that I've spoken to around me that motivation and getting out of bed and doing these hard things becomes that much harder when you're kind of looking at any kind of mental health or some mental health issues, whatever it may be. So yeah, with that, I'll kind of get into it, but I have kind of it's just a tip list of things that I've either done myself or I've seen work for friends, colleagues, peers of mine, etc. Around balancing those two aspects. So my first tip for UBC students or any kind of student is to get accommodations through your university. So here at UBC, we have the Center for Accessibility, and what they do is they provide student support in terms of more time for tests, assignments, just kind of giving you the extra time you might need in order to, again, balance mental health and getting your work done on time. This is hard for some people for two main reasons. One, from what I know, you do need official paperwork in order to access these resources, meaning that if you kind of suspect you might have a mental health issue going on, or just kind of in the beginning stages of that, you may not have access to these resources. And then the second kind of barrier with this is you have to talk about it, and you have to talk about it with someone you don't know. And that's, I mean, for enough of us, it's challenging telling your friends about what you're going through. And I've seen that for sure. So telling a complete stranger kind of your deepest, darkest troubles and tribulations, it's a difficult thing. But again, like Kailyn said, like, mental health it's not a weakness. Again, it's normal. It's something that should be discussed more. And if you do take the step, you're making positive change. My second step, or my second tip, I should say, is office hours. So if tip one doesn't go your way, office hours are super key. What that is allows you to meet your teachers and get some face-to-face with them. A lot of the times, if you meet your profs and speak to them, even at a personal level, without an accommodation from UBC based on what you're going through, they're going to be understanding. They're all human too. They know what it's like. And a lot of the time they will give you extra support, not directly, but they will kind of maybe speak to you about assignments earlier on, or maybe go through certain things with you before they're due. Third tip, this one is what's kind of saved my life in university, and that's studying with friends. And it kind of joins two factors of what I've found helps my own personal mental health, and that's having a community and friends around me, as well as kind of finding motivation to do work or school, whatever it may be. And what I've kind of done in the past myself is I'll set up times to study with friends, and I'll make that a very set date, something I can't really back out of. And what that does is, again, it gives you a reason to get out of bed. It gives you a reason to leave the house. And for a lot of people, and myself included, that's really the hardest part, is just taking that step and getting started. Just to add on to that, again, I apologize to anyone who I've studied with, but I'm sure a lot of people have noticed that when I study, I either talk a lot or I don't talk at all. And when I talk a lot, it's not just kind of jabber or anything like that. I really like to talk about what I'm learning. And personally, I find, again, this really helps for motivation with school, especially if you're facing some kind of issues, is finding that motivation. And how I achieve that through speaking about it is, humans are innately, we like to learn, right? We want to understand what we don't understand. And that's the notion that's driven science and everything we've learned as a society. So if someone speaks, for example, like you said, I'm in kinesiology. If someone's talking to me about finance, I am so lost. Or computer science, like I can't even work my laptop. So it's something that I kind of innately want to hear and something I want to learn more about. And I find that when I speak to someone about what I'm learning and they show interest and they ask me questions, not only does it kind of further my understanding of the topic by answering questions and explaining, but it really kind of gives me motivation that someone else is interested and wants to see me do well. Tip 4 is studying outside the home or outside the house. For me personally, I can never study in my room. It gets a little too distracting, as in, especially if I'm not having a tough day. TV's right there, bed's right there, phone's on the desk. Like it's a lot of stimulus, and it's a lot of kind of scapegoats that you can use to avoid dealing with the hard things you have to do, like school, especially if you're not feeling too hot. So getting outside the house, I found, is a huge kind of tip and something that I've done to focus down and get through school. My next tip is similar to what Mr. Keller said, and that's goal setting. And not easy goals per se, but achievable goals. You don't want to set yourself up for failure. Not only is that going to put excess stress on yourself, but it's counterproductive. So what I do is small attainable goals, and that can happen either every day, every week, however long you want to make them. But make sure it's something that you're able to do. And once you kind of get that momentum of achieving what you want to achieve, it's only going to get easier. And yeah, also, again, like Mr. Keller was saying, it helps organize the brain, which can never be a bad thing. On to my last two short tips, and I'll move on. Second last is nutrition. Again, speaking anecdotally, I find I'll go a whole day of studying and not eating a single thing. And I think a lot of students relate to that, especially during exam seasons or with heavy course loads during the year. So bringing snacks to your study sessions, or bringing something to eat, or bringing some money if you want to go get something kind of to have a study break. What I've kind of read and understood is that going through periods of not eating, especially when you're under stress already, or maybe experiencing depression or something like that, it can increase your irritability, and it can increase your depression and feelings of sadness, anger, etc. So make sure you always have kind of something to snack on when you're working. And then the last one is very applicable to a lot of students and a lot of young people, and that is partying. So specifically alcohol, substances, partying. So a lot of us university students, and the week is comprised of work, and the weekends are comprised of blowing off the steam that you accumulated during the week. And again, speaking anecdotally, when I've been going through some hard times in the past, I've really used those weekends and used partying and these social settings as a way to kind of just forget everything I didn't want to think about. And that's tough, because it gets you in a trap of, yes, you're using this and it's getting your mind off something, but inherently it's not healthy for you, and inherently you're developing a dependence, which again just kind of puts you in a spiral loop. So something I will say is, if you do find yourself kind of falling into the bracket of using any kind of drugs, alcohol, partying, whatever it may be, to kind of cope instead of as maybe a healthy reward for a harder week's work or whatever, or a celebration, it might be worth it to kind of step back and consider the implications of that, and also maybe speak to some people around you about how that may affect you and them. And yeah, also I do have a number that I took down for anyone who is experiencing any alcohol and substance abuse issues, which I will drop in the chat as soon as I finish talking. And yeah, I think that's it for me. There's just a few tips that I found helpful for me and people around me, and I look forward to hearing you guys' questions.
Thank you so much for sharing. And especially those tips will definitely come in handy for all the students on the call, with exams just around the corner now. But now moving on to Henry. He's, as I said, a third-year student in mechatronics, and as someone who's been working on a mental health art therapy startup. So Henry, as someone who's had firsthand experience in helping others overcome their mental health challenges, is there anything that we can do from an outsider's perspective to better recognize when a peer or family member is struggling with their mental health, and what can we really do to help them?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. Yeah, I think it's actually kind of a complicated question. So maybe I'll try to tell you a little story that'll kind of help get to how I tackle that. So I remember when I was in the 12th grade, I remember a night, and I remember the phone ringing. And I remember I wasn't really expecting it, but it was the kind of phone call that you get, and then you kind of forget about everything that's happening. And I remember my best friend was on the other side, and he was crying, and he didn't sound sober. And I asked him what was wrong, and he told me, like, I don't think I'll make it to tomorrow. And this wasn't the first time that he talked to me about suicide, but it had always been kind of abstract, and it didn't feel like that. So I said to him, hold on, talk to me. So I talked to him, and I calmed him down enough that I could call his mom, and then we called the ambulance, and we got him to the hospital. And that was good because he was no longer in any immediate danger. So that worked out. Just a side note, today he's doing fine, but that wasn't an isolated incident. In high school, 3 of my closest friends came to me and talked to me about wanting to kill themselves. And each time they'd explain that, and yeah, I'd listen. So I'm no therapist. Like, I definitely wasn't qualified to be hearing some of the things I was hearing. So what I did was I listened, and if it was super serious, I made sure they were safe. That was super important. But basically, I was just there as a friend, reminding them that I loved them. So yeah, something that a counselor told me at the time, I still think about a lot today. And it's that your job as a friend isn't to soak up all their sadness. It's to be there to provide happiness. And so that's something that I learned then, because it took a toll on me. Like, having these people come and talk to me, and some of my best friends, I had to feel like I was strong and I couldn't show weakness. And it felt like my mental health had to be working for multiple people some days. Yeah, so I had to find an outlet, and what I found was that writing helped me. So I wrote to understand how I felt at the time and to release all the little kind of devils inside me that, like, they had to find a way out, and I found that they found their way out onto the page. And so that's what I still do to this day. And I got a book here, which I've kept since high school. And yeah, I wrote a lot about those times. Basically, I mean, mainly this is just filled with stuff about girls, but yeah, I wrote a lot about my mental health. Yeah, so after that, and figure out that writing was super helpful, I came across the idea of art therapy. And from then, my mind just started going. Art therapy, if you don't know, it's a discipline that exists off the idea that creating art is cathartic, that basically creating anything in any way that you want helps release all those little devils I was talking about. So I came up with a business idea, which I'm working on, which is basically an application that uses art therapy to improve mental health. And it provides users with daily creative writing prompts. And then we get an AI that adapts to better serve people creative writing prompts. And then basically you can choose from like prompt journeys tailored by art therapists, or pair it with an actual counselor. It's all kind of complicated, but basically it just helps you to track your mental health journey through writing and through art. And that was something that I find super helpful. Like, when I'm going through stuff today, I can just look at this book, go back, see that I felt this exact same way before. And then a month later, I was feeling super happy. And that helps put everything in perspective. Yeah, it also, the actual act of putting it on the page is so, like, insanely helpful for understanding what I'm thinking. Yeah, so if I can leave you with any two things, it would be that writing down how you feel is sometimes even better than telling another person, because you can be totally honest. You don't feel like you're being judged. And also that when somebody comes to talk to you, yeah, basically just being there to listen and not to judge them, and to be happiness, not to be the sadness. So yeah, thank you for asking the question.
Of course, no, thank you for sharing. And thank you to all the other gentlemen on the panel for sharing their own stories. So with that, we'll conclude our panelist presentations for the event. So now I'd like to open up the floor for questions and begin our Q&A with the panel. So for anyone listening in, please use the Q&A tab at the bottom of your panel. And please also write the name of the panelist that your question is directed to, or state if it's an open question that anyone can answer. Well, as people think, I guess I'll start off with a question of my own. This one's directed to Nick, actually. Well, working in an investment bank in New York City, it must be a very high stress environment to be in every day. How do you really deal with the stress in the workplace?
Yeah, I think and there might be parallels when you are at university to it. I think people stress out in the moment. It was one of the panelists that mentioned, I think it's Henry. I think what the app that Henry has sounds incredible. Honestly, I think I would love to know more about it. But that app kind of, wasn't it Henry said, I write down something and then I go back to it a couple of days later and I'm like, what the hell did I stress about? You know what I mean? But we kind of have to do that with ourselves. in a sense, is say, this moment is terrible. I have a deal I have to close tomorrow. I have 5 presentations. All these analysts did a crap job, and now I'm going to fix this presentation myself. And that sort of I've got to win this deal. And then the next day you're with the client and you forget to ask the client, listen, what's your needs? You're telling them what you're thinking instead of listening. And I think that maybe would be my message to anybody, that the way to manage your stress is to actually think of what the other people are wanting and asking from you, and what you can add to life for other people. And that's normally not got to do with money. Because everybody focuses so much on the money as opposed to saying, well, actually, does it mean anything to society? Do I add anything to society? So a very roundabout question to say that, yeah, I mean, I have to admit there are moments of terrible, terrible stress. And I think the best way to think about it is just, does this really add value to anybody in life, or am I just stressing myself out at the moment? I hope that makes sense.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for that. Next, we have a question from Josh, who's posing to anyone on the panel, so anyone can answer this. Who has had the biggest positive impact on your mental health, and why?
So I'd love to take a stab at that one, Jason, and I want to introduce something that might not be what you're expecting, but I want you to think about the reality that we as mammals, there is a mammalian survival code encoded on our DNA, and it's all about connection, and it's all about attachment. And this is why, the absolute worst form of punishment or torture is isolation. And all you've got to do is watch, like, the movie, what's the one with Tom Hanks when he gets to know the volleyball? Somebody help me here. Castaway, right? The movie Castaway. And one of the statements I will often make when I'm doing presentations on mental health is that I think in our Western world, most of us are lucky to live in a community of 1 or 2 people. And what I mean by that is not the number of people in your neighborhood, not the number of people in your fraternity, not the number of people that do your likey things on your Facebook and your Snapchat or whatever social media. But I'm talking about people that you can truly do this with, where you can really be open and authentic with. And we develop in our lives our most important attachment figures. And as children, we develop what we call our attachment frame through early childhood experiences. But then as adults, we bond to a primary adult attachment figure, 1 or 2. And what we know is that having that with a loving partner is so key to our mental health. And so I would say who the biggest impact on my mental health is in a positive way is my loving partner, who is my wife. That safe place that I can come home to, that person that I can talk to, that person that when I'm going through something challenge, I conjure up that image of that loving partner, because it's from that place of a bond that I feel safe, and that I get my emotional and mental strength from. And just to tell you a quick little story on that is, we all know about the September 11th Twin Towers bombing, or the airplanes in New York City 21 years ago. And as you would probably expect, when sociologists and psychologists follow people that were directly impacted by those events, there's a significant number of those people not doing very well today. The trauma from being there in the immediate vicinity or in the actual Twin Towers was so significant that they've developed a major trauma response. But there is a subset of people that not only has bounced back with resilience, but is actually thriving today, to the point where some psychologists want to coin a term post-traumatic growth. And what we know about this subset of individuals is these are the people that had social support. These are the people that had connection, meaningful connection, usually in the form of a loving partner as an adult attachment figure. So to me, it's all about relationship. It's all about connection. And so whether that's with a loving partner or a couple of really good close friends, that's absolutely critical. And that's how I would explain where I get my positive mental health from.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing. Next, we have a question, which I believe is also for the whole panel to answer. What are some of the goal setting routines that keep you accountable and constantly help you set good goals for yourself?
Well, I'll take this one. I think the key in starting a good goal setting routine is to not set your goals too far away, not too high, because as you achieve your goals, you want to start to build confidence that you can achieve goals and have a routine. If you set them too high, too early, it's going to be a lot easier for you to fall off. So I think the key is to just make sure that they're attainable. And then as you start to build confidence, making attainable goals, then you can start to extend those goals and then make them longer, make them more challenging, and make them deeper.
Thank you very much. Next, we actually have another question for you, Dan. How do you open up to people that seemingly have it worse when you come off as successful and, as you said yourself, alpha?
Well, it's tough because, again, like when people start to look up to you and they start to think that you're doing so well and that you're just some tough guy, that it's going to be easy. So it's not easy. I think the key is in that vulnerability and having that vulnerability and just saying, am I concealing or am I revealing? And the key to first healing is to reveal. Like, you have to accept it. You have to acknowledge it. You have to accept it. And you have to be willing to talk about it. And the more, and you have to also recognize that the more you try to hide it, the worse it's going to get. And this is what I was saying before, is that when you have to have many different type of solutions, you can't just rely on any one thing. So in my industry, being in MMA and being an athlete, a lot of us think that that's the answer. It's not. So we have to have many different ways. I mean, it can help you with coping, but you have to have many different ways. But I think the initial key is to be vulnerable and be willing to reveal who you really are, and to reveal that you are human and that you do have emotions and are not afraid to talk about them.
Completely agree. Thank you, Dean. Next one is for Henry, for when he spoke of his friends who were contemplating suicide. Were there any school counselors or anyone that was able to help following the initial call you received?
Yeah, definitely. I was not able to, I didn't have the emotional faculties to handle that kind of information myself. So I spoke with a school counselor who helped a ton. Anytime that, as I said, it happened multiple times, but anytime it was talking about self-harm or suicide, it was I need to tell somebody else this information. So I told my school counselor, and in one of the cases where I felt like the parents weren't doing anything and that my friend wasn't going to do anything, I let her know, and then she basically they listened to her instead of listening to me. I was 17 or something, and I'm trying to talk to their parents, be no, this is a serious problem. So yeah, it helps to get that authority, I think, especially when you're young, and also when the issue is so severe. So yeah, school counselors helped. All right.
Great, thank you. This one's actually for John. How has the conversation around men's mental health changed since you started Heads Up Guys?
Well, it's changed a lot. And if I reflect on my career over more than 25 years now, it's changed a tremendous amount. And I'll actually give an anecdote related to sport. I've heard sport reference a lot. So I play hockey, a bunch of old farts getting in the room. And, up until very recently, conversation was your typical locker room banter. But over time, I've noticed guys are more and more willing to share stuff and reveal, as Dean said, reveal aspects of themselves that doesn't, in fact show they're human. It shows that they're vulnerable. It also shows in revealing their vulnerability in that particular context that they trust others. And that's taking a big risk on themselves. And you know, now I see the conversations in the room where there's a lot more authenticity and genuineness being shared about each of us, and being able to reach out for a hand. So even in, you know, the short time that Heads Up Guys has been in existence, when did we launch? 2015. It's been tremendous. Now, people have said, well, maybe that's because I'm in the room, but I've been in the room the whole time. And, you know, with one of these groups, it's, you know, 20 plus years. I've been doing the same thing all this time. I think it's reflecting more of a societal and cultural shift where we are more willing to share with one another. And, you know, that's a great thing. And certainly, you know, one of the silver linings, if I can call it that, of COVID is that there have been more and more conversations around the topic of mental health and mental illness. And I think that as well has allowed people, and guys in particular, to reach out. I've never been busier in my life, to be honest, because of that. And by and large, it's men reaching out to me. And you know, again, referencing something that Dean said earlier on, is guys often need permission from other men to talk about it. So if they hear another fellow share something, reveal something, be vulnerable, or even know that they're a supportive person to reach out to, it makes it okay. That permission makes it okay. And so these kinds of conversations, as I said earlier, are so fundamental, because, you know, I'm just blown away by the sharing and the wonderful information and the advice and guidance. And all of us can take something away from that and know it's okay to not be okay, as Cameron said, and knowing, even more importantly, it's not okay to sit with it if you're not doing well.
Great, thank you so much. So the next question here is for Kailyn and Dean. What strategies do you recommend for being comfortable with sharing your personal mental health situations and struggles within a group of competitive and potentially intimidating men, such as in your respective sports careers?
You want to go first?
I can try to spit it off top of my head. I haven't really constructed something. It's a really good question, though. That's actually a good question. I mean, I would say the biggest thing is just like find the people you are most comfortable talking about. Like, you should have an idea as to, like, you would actually be surprised, like, the people around you, how well they know you and how well they can actually kind of like probe and ask the right types of questions. Because I always find that's the best thing for me, is like, I usually try to talk to people before I've actually had time to kind of like sit down, talk about it, collect my thoughts, and then kind of frame it in whatever lens I want them to be able to view it as. I find if I just talk about it when it's raw, then they're pretty good at probing questions to kind of help me, guide me into finding an answer myself, right? You know, it partially could be the fact that, like, I haven't really had a negative experience yet in the workplace or something, of talking to someone and, you know, them using it against me. But then again, I think people, generally speaking, act out of the goodness of their hearts, right? No one acts in malicious intent in any which way, right? People want to help you. You're there for the same reason. You have the same end goal, right? So I would say, like, yeah, just find people you're comfortable talking to. Do it in a raw form. You know, if it's better that you want to go write it down, collect your thoughts, and then discuss it, do that. But I personally find it's almost better, because then, you know, I'll say something and I'll hear myself say something. I'm like, well, that just sounds dumb. Like, why am I even fretting about this anymore? You know what I mean? So that's kind of worked for me, and I found that has been really good. And I think it's the thing, like, yeah, keep in the back of your mind of, like, you know, no one really is malicious. At least I don't believe people are malicious at their core, right? You know, other people might have examples where something has come back and bit them in the ass, but I've had nothing but positive experiences whenever I've chatted with people about it right now.
For me, I think it comes down to trust. You know, you have to be able to trust the people that you're talking to. And when you say, how do you find people in your industry to talk to? Sometimes you're not going to find them in your industry. In fact, more often than not, you might not find them in your industry, and you have to look outside your industry. But the problem with people that are so deep and so committed to their profession or their industry is that they become that. So, like, for me, I was an MMA fighter and I'm involved in this industry, but I'm more than that. So if I didn't see myself as more than that, then I would go, all right, I need to find somebody in this industry to be able to talk to. But for me, I look outside of that. I look outside of that industry because I'm more than just one thing. So you can find some solace, you can find help, you can find what you're looking for anywhere as long as you can trust them. So the key isn't to stay inside this bubble because you do one thing. Don't stay inside that bubble. Go outside the bubble. Find whatever it is that you need in order to get what you want, in order to feel how you want. And I think that's part of the key.
Totally. And we have a follow-up question for you here. Can you tell us a bit more about the Ride for Awareness initiative and some of the great progress you made in the MMA community?
Oh yeah, that was an incredible ride that I did. I did that last year, and that was actually how I found Heads Up Guys. Is that I wanted to do a ride for mental health, and then I saw that Heads Up Guys was specifically for men's mental health. So I reached out and said, "Hey guys, I'm going to do a bike ride across the state of Florida, and I'm going to donate all the money to you guys." And they were like, "Come on, let's do it." Um, I mean, it was an incredible experience, and well, I mean, it was just an amazing thing, and everybody supported it and got behind it. And I think that it really opened up a lot of dialogue in the MMA community because this was a time where like mental health had started to gain popularity, but not necessarily in the mixed martial arts space. But then when I did this ride for this cause, I think it opened up that dialogue in the space. And again, it allowed people permission to talk about it. It allowed other guys to go, man, maybe I'm not as healthy as I thought I was. Or maybe, you know, punching people in the face isn't the answer that I was looking for in order to be more mentally healthy. So I will always support Heads Up Guys in men's mental health or mental health in general. I will always support that because again, I have a responsibility, because when I was suffering, when I was at my lowest, people helped me. And I feel like if I got help, anybody can use help. So I'm willing to help whoever needs help. And that's why I do it, whether from a direct standpoint or indirect standpoint, like a bike ride across the state to open up the dialogue.
That's a great story. Thank you. Next, we have a question for either Cameron or Nick. How do you cope with constant travel in your work and life? And how do you maintain your mental health through this?
Well, I guess one of the unintended positive consequences of the pandemic has been not having to travel. And that certainly has made a big difference in my life. But I'm not going to pretend to say it's easy. It's very, very challenging to be away from your family, to try to, keep up with your nutrition and your exercise, particularly when you're changing time zones. And back to that kind of being alone factor. My family was always good about driving me to the airport. And I always described the two most difficult moments. The first one was the curbside goodbye. Once I was through security, it's kind of like, okay, I'm on the trip now, but the other one I always called the big empty. It's when I'd get into that hotel room at night and there was nobody there. It was just this empty space. And you really feel alone and you wake up alone, and you've got to have your support network that is not your family in those instances. So it's not easy, but when I did it well, and there's times I did it well, it was about nutrition and it was about taking breaks and getting exercise, really.
Yeah, I agree with Cameron. For me, the most important part is you're going to like it. So sometimes you got to choose a job that you like. And if your job is like mine, that you have to travel a lot, start liking it, and not viewing it as a problem, but it's something that's actually fun. Take your partner along, add a couple of days on, take the weekend. Spend the weekend in Chicago with your partner. And you know what? You'll do better business on Monday because you can talk about Chicago. It's a great city. I like the jazz scene. We went to this bar, we went to this restaurant, and your client just opened up to you and like, this guy's interested in my society. He's not just here to grab a deal from New York and rush back and charge me whatever. So yeah, like it, and yeah, show that you're interested in your client and not in yourself. If that's helpful, I think so. Okay.
Definitely. Thank you. Okay, next one is for Henry or anyone else who has input. If you know of someone who has major depressive episodes and talks about suicide, but claims they're fine and do not need help in between them, what can you do to help? It can be scary waiting for someone who you care about to have another situation and not be there to help.
Yeah, that's very scary. Yeah, and it's a difficult situation there that you're in. Basically, the way I handled that is remembering like what my guidance counselor told me about, like, I can't bear their weight for them, so I can't feel like I'm responsible for the pain that they're going through. All I can do is basically be there to be, yeah, the happiness there, to be there for like the happy moments and to hopefully help them forget about it a little bit. So yeah, that's the best advice I can give there. If you do think that it's like serious and that there is a good, like a chance of self-harm, then I recommend going to somebody who can, like, there are ways that you can go about, yeah, like calling the ambulance or something. But basically, that's only for super severe cases. For the most part, it's just about being there and being a good friend.
Yeah, can I chime in? I could chime in a little bit on this too, and I think it's important that most guys will probably not be willing to say something anyway, and most guys are going to be willing to be like, "Nah, I'm good. Don't worry about me. I'm straight." And I think that is, as a friend, especially if you've been through it, you can recognize the signs, and you can allow them to keep their quote unquote manhood and not go, "Okay, I get it." But you still have to be there and be supportive. So, but you can allow them to keep their manhood and go, "Okay, yeah, I'm sure you're fine, but let's hang out." Call them, check in on them, make sure that they are good. I mean, I think that's going to be important because, especially unsolicited, check in on them because when you do it unsolicited, now they know that, hey, listen, I got people that care about me. Because the reason why they feel like that is because they feel like they don't have people that care about them. But when you show them that you care about them, you show them that you are supportive and show them that they are loved, they're less likely to actually have those thoughts and those feelings, or they're more like those thoughts and those feelings are more likely to go away. So you don't have to call them out on it and fight with them about, "Hey man, I sense that you are, going through something and you better tell me about it," because they're just going to deny it anyway. As men, we're going to deny it anyway. But I think it's our job to go, "All right, all right, I understand, but I'm just checking in on you and I'm going to be here for you. So if you need me, I'm right here. In fact, I think I'm going to come hang out anyway. So let's go do something."
I'd like to just add something to that if I could. And it's a reminder that, like, for instance, when I teach mental health first aid, we don't ever demand anything, but we encourage, right? So the language is we encourage professional help. We encourage other supports, but you can never demand. But here's the thing, folks, people know when we're genuine. People know when you care. And so as hard as it is for us men, when somebody comes alongside with real genuine empathy and in a caring, supportive way asks if you're okay, or identifies that they are seeing observable signs or hearing about symptoms of poor and declining mental health, and they're concerned about your wellness and your survival, what a difference that makes. It's just huge. And the key is to focus on those observable things, right? Focus on those, just name them, but name them in a genuine way. Here's what we know about suicide. We know that 80% or more of suicides are preventable because it's that number where there are direct and indirect signs and symptoms up front. It's just that unfortunately our mental health literacy in our culture is so low overall that we don't pick up on them. And when we go to people who survive a suicide attempt and we come to them and we say something along the lines of, "Hey, if somebody would have asked you if you were going to kill yourself, would you have said you?" And they say, "Yes, I would have. Of course I would have. But I had nobody. I was all alone." And so ask the question directly, be really clear, but do it in a supportive way. And as Dean said, if they don't give you, the response, if they don't acknowledge it, you come back to them another time. But just provide that support and that emotional presence.
I will also chime in if you don't mind. Pretty much all I'd want to say. I mean, there's a ton of good points being said here. Really, I think the biggest things, at least from what I've personally seen and experienced, I had a bad problem for a little while of I'd always try to go to fix it mode. You know what I mean? Someone would come to me and say, "Hey, I'm dealing with this stuff," and I'm like, "Okay, well, let's talk about it. Let's try to solve it." I realize that's probably the worst thing you can possibly do in most of those scenarios. And really what you should do is just say, hey, you know what, if you want to talk about it, I'm here. At the end of the day, like, I love you. I'm here to support you any which way I possibly can. You know what I mean? I think the other really important thing to say here, and something that I've really noticed has helped a lot too, is just like, even if they get through that specific episode, the chances that might potentially come up again down the road are still, it's still there, it's still present. You know what I mean? Friends of mine who are in accounting, who are in finance, like, what their business season is going to look like, what that's going to be like. So I think it's just the thing of like sending them the reminder, you know what I mean? Even if they've just gone through it, they're looking really happy, everything's good. Maybe you're just in a group chat with them, or maybe it's just something as small as like, hey, you haven't seen them post on Instagram or something like that. Just like something really small, but you might know it's out of the norm or something. Just shoot them that message. Just be like, hey, just thinking about you, man. Hope everything's good. Would love to catch up or whatever, right? But just so they constantly kind of know that, hey, someone is here for me at the end of the day, right? I think it's just a really important thing to kind of have in there.
Jason, can I add something as well?
Of course you can.
So two things, and it was something that Matthew mentioned, right? Substance abuse. I also think it's very valuable to be an ally. You need to be, I think it's so valuable if you can help somebody like the way Henry did, right? And it's normally through the symptoms that you see it. And substance abuse is very high up on there. And so I've lost some friends because of that, and it gets into a spiral. And sometimes you really need professional help where you just can't, the talking bit doesn't help anymore. But so that is something that you can perhaps sometimes take a step back with somebody and say, listen, I'm just noticing like it's every weekend and it's getting really hectic. The second part I wanted to say is jokes, like buddy jokes, but it's actually racist, or there's a joke and somebody's actually saying something sexist, right? I don't think it's a good idea to call them out at that moment, but it's maybe worthwhile talking to somebody that you realize in that group is really vulnerable, that's being hurt by that's being said there, and have a nice personal chat with them around that. Funny enough, a lot of people that joke about homosexuality, they need that discussion. And if you don't think it wasn't the right thing to say in that environment, I think it's a good idea to take that person alone and say, listen, I just didn't like what you said there, right? And they might tell you a lot of stuff that they needed to hear from somebody that's a true ally.
Thank you, everyone. Those are all very, very great comments. Nick, I actually have another question for you, kind of relating to that. Well, people use a lot of online platforms like Reddit and Discord to vent, and have used kind of dark humor and jokes to help deal with their mental health. Do you have any thoughts on using humor to deal with mental health, and of any politically correct culture that tries to inhibit these kind of jokes that people use?
Yeah, it's a minefield, that whole discussion. I'm just going to say what I personally think, right? I think it's good to have humor, right? I can laugh at a gay joke. I honestly believe you can, but if you don't laugh at a gay joke, then there's probably a problem with me. It's very easy to ascertain whether somebody is joking because they're malicious or they're just having a nice, fun discussion, right? I mean, if you're asking did Buttigieg take paternity leave because he's going to breastfeed his baby? I think that's malicious. That's clearly malicious, right? Somebody, it's funny. I find it funny, but I know that it's malicious. So yeah, that's what my feeling is what is the real intention behind it? And a lot of people do that because they're hurting themselves. So that's what I was trying to say. Maybe you can turn it around and say, yeah, that's funny, but why did you say that? But I mean, you're going to do better than I do it, but you're going to, get the discussion going around that. And then the last thing I want to say, and then I'll stop there, is I think all the recognition we get from social media is in a sense false, right? I mean, I'm not saying that. I think social media is great, but don't build your personal health on social media. That's the worst possible thing you can do. Like Cameron said, go to your significant other, go to your wife, go to your husband, go to your best friend, and make sure you have them. I realized after 10 years in New York, I took a step back and I said, like, who would I turn to in New York? And I had 5 people, and I'm like, something wrong with my life, right? I got to change this. Okay, let me stop.
Great, thank you so much, Nick. Next, this is for anyone. He says, we know that intentional self-care practices enhance mental health resilience. Can the panelists share some self-care practices that they find helpful for their own mental wellness or undertake as part of preventing a slide into poor mental health?
Oh, well, I love what I can't remember who said it. Was it Henry? Where he was talking about the art therapy. Yeah, I mean, to me, especially me, because I'm a creative person anyway. So art therapy is like religion for me. I've gotten into, I started with like coloring books, and then I've gotten into making candles and just doing all kinds of different things artistically and creatively to occupy myself. But to me, that was one of the strongest ways in order that I could take care of myself, and that was to express myself through that type of art. So art therapy to me probably leads the charge, whether it was writing or some of the other creative endeavors that I use, but art therapy to me was my favorite one.
Yeah, definitely a great one. Next, we actually have a question on that topic to Henry. Can you give some examples of the type of writing prompts that your app would use to get people to start expressing how they feel?
Yeah, so I don't know specific writing prompts. The idea is that we tailor it to the individual people. So depending on what they react to, so maybe we throw a quote and then that gets them to write more, or we'd put down like a general question, like I don't know, like what's your highest high, what's your lowest lows, like something like that to get people talking, and then the app would react to it to better serve them. And then the idea is that we'd be able to basically, depending on what they like to talk about, serve them more of that. Maybe they want to talk about relationships or want to talk about feelings of isolation or something. And then actual art therapists who know what to ask questions about would come up with questions that would hopefully get them talking more. So yeah, the idea.
Awesome, thank you. This one's for Kailyn or anyone else on the panel. How was your transition from being in university to working full-time in terms of mental health and change in lifestyle? I think that many graduating brothers are anxious about the end of the university adventure and how to manage that.
Good question. It's a really good question. Actually, I've been having a lot of conversations around that recently. I'll probably take a Matthew approach here and give a couple kind of talking points surrounding this. I think the first thing is finding a community to join. Whether that's, I think a common one here people discuss is sports teams. It could be something like a gym, anything like that. Recognize the fact that when you're in university, and especially when you're in a fraternity, it's you're constantly surrounded by people at any given time, right? You're with people at 24/7 essentially. And when you do leave that, it's going to change. Life will change around that, right? You'll be with coworkers, you'll still have some friends, but inevitably everyone kind of goes their own directions, right? Like the amount of people I can say that kind of were my like good fraternity brothers have all like moved away. No one's really in Vancouver anymore, right? You know, we still maintain relationships, we still talk. I'll fly out, I'll go see them every so often, but you know, it gets harder the older you get, I would say, right? So I think finding new communities to join and kind of like surrounding yourself with, that's a big one. Two, I would say being comfortable being alone and be like understanding that you still need time by yourself at times as well too. You know, whether that's really just to reflect and be introspective about what's kind of going on all around you at a given time. That's not to say that, you know, still have people to talk to, still bounce these ideas off. Like this is the kind of the whole topic we've discussed today, but there's a certain like value of being able to be comfortable being by yourself as well too. So I would say understand that. You know, for me, it was also getting in the hang of routines. I know people talk about like fitness and stuff. Meditation was a big one for me. Just waking up every morning, meditating, going to the gym. I think that was a way that I could kind of keep my own personal mental health in check, and I could kind of see if those types of routines were slipping in my life. You know, potentially other things might be slipping as well too, right? Maybe like, you know, I wasn't doing as good as I thought I potentially was doing, right? I think that would be a big one. And I think the other big one is like understanding that, you know, when you transition into a professional career, it's a marathon, it's not a sprint, right? Like I know it's there's so much of this kind of like pressure, especially when you're graduating, of like, hey, I'm gonna get a very prestigious job and then I'm just gonna go work my ass off for the next couple of years and then get this. I fell for the trap. Like I did that exactly. And before I knew it, I was like burning myself out, right? So I think understanding like everything, you know, everyone's gonna have their own pace at the way they're doing things, right? My friends that were immediately out of university that went straight to Goldman Sachs, they burned themselves after a year. They're taking time off now, or they're doing something different. So they're like, you know, why did I put myself through that much stress? Like I didn't want to do that. I should have just paced myself, right? So I think it's finding everything, like having everything in balance, I think is probably the most important thing, right? You know, if you'll find something you like to do, you'll enjoy that. But in the meantime, don't kill yourself trying to find that, right? I should say probably not kill yourself, burn yourself out. I think is the more appropriate way to put that in this scenario, right? But I would say those are kind of my biggest things.
Maybe I can add on to, because a lot of stuff like that kind of rang true to me as one, and I think all of you do it, right? Do your internships, and do your internships in different type of environments. Don't always go back to a bank. Try a fintech and swap around a little bit and see which environment you like, because if you like it, less stress, you're going to do much better. The second part is I find, don't forget your workout routines. If you can do cardio, Kailyn was mentioning he does it in the morning. I actually like to do my lunchtime, because say I start at 8 and I'm halfway through, I do an hour, 2 hours gym, and then I can work through to 8 o'clock. It's amazing how much you can pile onto your day if you, and I think Matthew mentioned that as well, right? Make sure that's a holy moment when you're gonna have you train and break your stress. Yeah, I think those are the two ones that stood out to me. And the third thing is, if your boss or your environment doesn't feel right, probably time to change it. If your boss doesn't say like, I really like Jason and he can go and run our branch in Switzerland, and you don't feel he feels that way, maybe it's time to change and find a boss that really feels that way, right? I think those are sort of advice I would give.
That's a really good point, because the other thing I would add on to that as well too is if you think about just how much time in a given year you are at your workplace, like it's a lot of time, right? It's between somewhere, you have 40-hour, 60-hour weeks, 80-hour weeks at given times, right? Make sure you're at a work culture that like it makes sense and you're comfortable in, right? Like I think there's a lot of that pressure of like, I want to get a good job, but take that time in the interview process to make sure this is a place that I'm really actually going to enjoy. I can actually get along with people. I can talk to these people. For the biggest thing for me is I made sure that my manager was someone that I could be like, I'm really going through a lot right now. Like I can tell I'm about to burn myself out. Can you just help me in any which way? Or can I just take a couple of days and really just kind of like collect myself again? And he's very supportive of that. He's always kind of checking in. He's kind of giving me the okays along the way around that kind of stuff. So be very critical about the interview stage as well too. I think especially with recent grads, they're way too eager just to jump the gun, and the first offer they get, they're like, yep, I'm gonna take it, let's go, right? But really like take the time and say, is this a place I'm gonna enjoy myself? Am I gonna learn well? And really, am I gonna be happy? Is this a good stage to be at, right? I think just do the due diligence on that, so you can kind of like have a good, healthy year, I would say.
Great points. Thank you so much. This next one's for Matthew. A university is fraught with many challenges. What have you found to be the most difficult thing, and what have you found helpful for addressing it?
Sure. So personally, a difficult thing I've really found is expectations, and that's both external and internal. And kind of what I mean by that is these days, I don't know what I mean. What I really am trying to say is everyone has huge expectations and big weight on their shoulders, I think, when they first come into university. And I believe that because back in the day, university, having a bachelor's degree was prestigious, right? It was highly sought after, and it was a very prestigious thing to have. And now these days, it kind of seems like the standard, and society is kind of promoting as the standard. And if that's the standard, as humans, we all want to do better. And so it's that constant fight between what can I manage and how high or how much can I achieve in order to be deemed worthy by both myself and by those around me. And I think also it's a bit of a double-edged sword, but when you hang out with successful and ambitious people, you're going to hear about all their successes, which is fantastic. But you also, that puts more pressure on yourself because you want to conform to those around you. And when you see people doing great things, you want to match that. You want to feel worthy. But also, again, how I kind of manage that is kind of tying back to what I said, having a community, having people around you. And again, while I did mention that as a double-edged sword, it's also a bit of a building block for new ideas, in the sense that some people who are working really hard and doing fantastic things around you may be able to give you tips on how to succeed in a certain area that you kind of are not as experienced in, or you may collaborate with someone on something you never thought of. So kind of plain and simple, I'd say expectations are the worst, especially when you place them on yourself. Or sorry, don't get me wrong. Expectations that are unreasonable are the worst. Expectations are great, but and then surround yourself with people that are gonna push you towards succeeding. And wasn't the most eloquent thing, but hopefully that answered the question.
That's great advice. Thank you so much, Matthew. I think we have time for one more. This one's open to the entire panel. How do you help someone who is likely dealing with mental health issues caused from their experiences at home with their family? For example, divorce, verbal abuse, or anything like that.
I think it's consistent with what we've been talking about earlier, and that's just, I mean, you can't solve somebody else's problem, but you can be supportive and you can be there for them. And I'll let them know that you care about them, because, you know, when somebody's going through something at home, obviously when they're surrounded by that, they're surrounded by that type of negative energy, and they start having feelings about themselves of worthlessness. But when you can show somebody that support and show that can add value to their life. So I think really what it comes down to is just always being supportive, always being there in a loving and genuine way, and just showing people that you care. And when you do that, you know, you can change lives that way.
If you guys don't mind if I hop in on this question too. If I'm just going to speak specifically to divorce, because I know it is quite a common thing these days. And personally, my parents, are together. But I do have lots of friends whose parents are divorced and who have gone through some issues with that. And again, it's kind of hard to relate, right? Because you never experienced those feelings yourself. And what I found is, on the kind of reciprocating end of advice that would be coming from me to a person, it could potentially seem disingenuous or maybe that I don't really understand. So what I would suggest and what I have done is, because it's a really common thing in kind of contemporary society, is point people potentially towards others who have gone through the same thing, and especially peers or people that you both know, because it's always nice to know that you're not alone. And when you're going through something especially like that, and you have, say, your parents going through divorce, again, you're really stuck in the middle of that often, and it could make you feel quite isolated. So finding or helping someone find someone who can be empathetic and who has been in that situation, I think is incredibly helpful.
Thank you so much. Well, that about wraps up our time for today. Thank you everyone so much for coming. We really appreciate you all being here. And a huge thank you to our speakers, UBC Medicine, Heads Up Guys, and our sponsors. Your support's been immense, and we could not have really achieved what we've done so far without you.
And great job by you, Jason. Really great job.
Yeah, great job, Jason.
Thanks,
Thank you. Could have been done without you. So now I'll put the donation link in the fundraiser in the chat below, which will be open for another few weeks. And if you are interested in donating, any and all contributions are very, very appreciated. But other than that, thank you again for joining us today, and have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday evening.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. That was just fantastic.